Welcome to Unmuted Nation, and it is time again to continue the Hear Me series. At this point, we've had conversations with men and women, with them expressing their truth and perspective, thoughts and ideas, and things that you want to know or we think we know, clarified. And I'm extremely gracious to Black men and Black women for coming through and just sharing their truth with Unmuted Nation. The series is going to continue, and as we look to expand this conversation and really kind of have it, I talked with my team about having conversations that matter. And for different reasons, we find, based on our own perspectives and our own experiences, we lift things that we think matters. And so that nobody is exempt from those behaviors. And we wanted to be sure that we included everybody and we gave everybody a chance to be heard. And so this part of the series will be no different. We are, well, it's Transwoman Hear Me, and I've got two amazing trans women joining the conversation today. I want to welcome Gia Love and Queen Jean to the conversation. Welcome to Unmuted Nation.
Hey.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for being here. I know sometimes it's just difficult to say yes, and we don't always, like, I think even the description that we provide, I think we try to make it as forthcoming and honest as possible. And I find in each of these conversations, I leave with new perspective, things that I thought I knew about Black men. As a Black man, I left leaving this conversation baffled and really searching for additional information just to aid to my own understanding of myself. And so I think I'm excited about where this conversation will go. First, I want to individualize it. And so I don't know, I have to explain every single time. I haven't known anybody that's been a part of these series. So like 5 minutes before, I say hi, and we kind of come into this fresh. And I want viewers and listeners to understand these conversations are just raw. And so I like to start out with just a brief introduction. So first, I'll start with you, Gia, and if you could just tell us a little bit about where you're from, what you do, and Queen, I'll jump to you, and then we'll jump into the conversation.
So I'm Gia Love. I'm from New York City, the Bronx specifically. I am a model, activist, community organizer. Currently, I work at Columbia University in the Spatial Epidemiology Lab, conducting research for trans women of color. And also, I am a planning committee member and the director of community engagement for Black trans women in the arts. Before we pass it to Jean, I just want to provide a language shift here. When we refer to like men and women and trans women, we want to say cisgender, because I am a woman and I want to be very particular about the language used to like tell my experience and also delineate between the experiences of others. And I don't want to dilute from my womanhood by just not including me in the intersections of that experience. So we want to use the language cisgender to refer to people who were assigned one gender at birth and identify with that gender currently.
Got it. And thank you for that clarification and even providing that language. Jean, I want to bring you into the conversation and learn a little bit about your background as well. If you could just tell me where you're from and what you do.
Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Queen Jean. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I am an activist. I'm a costume designer, and currently I'm the founder of Black Trans Liberation, an organization that is here to ratify the statistic that Black trans folks, that their life expectancy is 35. So that is something that we want to dismantle. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you just dropped a gem there, and I want to get into details like that. Even with you, and my mind is blown already. You said the life expectancy for a transgendered woman is 35?
For a Black trans woman, yes, it is 35.
Wow. Wow. Well, I mean, there at this point, there's tons of background that we could do, but I want to kind of start at the beginning because I think, as with learning language and understanding, one thing that and this is Unmuted Nation, right? So be free, don't hold anything back, correct me, because this is really, I think this is time to correct. Correct stereotypes in this culture. And I think these conversations, lifting conversations and bringing these conversations to the forefront is really how we get on the same page. I get in trouble a lot for saying that people are ignorant or unlearned. And a lot of times in certain communities, they take the word ignorant as offensively. And I don't say it as means to be offensive, but you are ignorant if you refuse to learn or understand something. And so when you speak on things that you don't know, you speak ignorantly, and you sound like a fool if you're unlearned. And so if you guys would bear with me as I learn as well, I think that what I want, and really I want you to get something special from this experience, but I really want people to leave this conversation with corrected ideals and corrected thoughts and hopefully corrected beliefs. And I can't shape or control how people believe, but we know sometimes the way that people think is rooted in belief. And even that belief sometimes is ignorant. And so I think one of the largest things that, and we can get into misnomers and misunderstandings later. I want to talk about, and Gia, I'm going to go back to you just because you brought the language clarification up initially. We talk about cisgender, which to my understanding means people identifying with the gender they were assigned at birth.
With the sex they were assigned.
With the sex that they were assigned at birth. And so though that would make if you don't mind just giving me some education and give me the full definition of cisgender, so we can move in the conversation and be clear.
So sex, when you are born, a doctor determines one's sex based off of their genitalia. That's how most doctors define sex. And someone who is cisgender is assigned a sex at birth, and then they identify with the gender norms and gender representations and gender performance of that sex. So for example, if you were assigned female at birth, you would live your life and grow up to be like a woman, right? For trans women, in the context of this conversation, if you were assigned male at birth, you would grow up and live your life as a woman, right? And that's who you are. For me, the reason why I like to use that language is because I think oftentimes there is these adjectives to describe us as real or not real. So when people say women versus trans women, what they're saying is they're diluting my experience as a woman. So I like to give context to the experience, because at the end of the day, I didn't really talk about a transition in that definition because, I've always been this way. My mind has always been geared towards this way. If anything, people outside of me controlled and constructed a gender presentation that I did not want. So I like to use this language because I am real. I am a real woman. I am a woman, but I am a trans woman, and I am affirmed in that experience. And I like to speak it and uplift it.
No, and I appreciate that. And I think that's the most important, right? This is who you are. This is what you want. And this is how you should be respected. And I stand by that. I think there are a lot of misunderstandings. And I think let's just be clear. Everybody's experience is not the same. And I think the delineation that you made of doctors playing a part in assigning the sex to the child at the time, and the child just growing into whatever has been assigned at the time, and then not being true. With you, can you talk to me a little bit about? You said you've always felt that, well, you've always been this way, not felt. You've always been this way.
Right. Yeah.
There's so many miscommunications or misunderstandings of, and people that will tell you that you weren't. People that will look at you and say, no, you were born a certain thing, or you were born a certain way. Clarify for me, if you don't mind, that
Right.
statement and what you mean by that, and just talk to me about the experience. And be honest with me. I know it's
Yeah.
sometimes.
I'm an honest girl. You don't
Okay.
have to.
And sometimes, people initially reject it, like I said, because they don't know. And so, what I hope people that come into this conversation,
they do know. That's the thing, because when I was 4 years old, like 3 years old, and I started to express a gender, because like when you're young and like you are just a kid, certain things are allowed. Then when you get to a certain age, then they start to chastise you for your performance. And when I was young, like, kids called me names that alluded to their identifying me as this thing, right? So I was called a faggot very young, right? By like adults and by
how young?
Kids. I would say my first memory is probably like 4.
Wow.
I didn't know what a faggot was.
Obviously not.
Yeah, I didn't know what that meant in the larger scheme of things, but like they knew, they knew. I knew that I was a girl, and
so were you called this? Or you were called faggot by kids and adults, or just kids around you?
Like in the hood, like back in the day, there was no political correctness. So to call someone like me a faggot was totally acceptable. Like oftentimes,
I don't understand how that's acceptable to call a 4-year-old a faggot. I think that's
but that's like the hood. That's like where you grow up. That's like, it was like an adjective that described a person like me at that time. And even to this day, there are many adjectives in our subcultural, like smaller micro communities that people use to identify people. And unless you have the opportunity to break away from those spaces, you may think that that's totally okay. So basically, people did know. People identified me as something, and put like a negative negativity to it. And basically, for me personally as a child, I always knew that like I would get a car, but I wanted dolls. I would want to like play with girls. I didn't want to really socialize and be social with men. And this was like, those are just small examples of like my like trans experience, but
sure. I want to go deeper and not only ask you how you carry that today, but one of the questions that I always like to throw in is because it is you saying people knew and you knowing people know. I think that's a blow to people that have told themselves that they didn't, and told that people that tell themselves now.
Yeah, that's like, when I was 18 years old, my mother had the audacity to ask me, like, was I queer? And I was like, I'm queer. Like, I am. Like, I am. Just like my brother never had to come out as straight, right? All my life, like, you caught me with boys before, you called me names, like, you knew these things. So, like, like it's denial, right? It's denial.
With you knowing so early, do you feel like that made you have did you ever feel at any point that you had to grow up sooner, or grow up faster because you didn't have any support in what you were dealing with?
Well, as a trans person, we are very spiritually connected because we're being pulled so far from who we are growing up with respect to our gender. And a lot of time gender, for a lot of us, that's the lens that we view the world through, because that's something that we've been denied. So basically, like, I definitely had to know who I was and stand firm in that. And oftentimes, even when I was pulled away from that, in my heart and in my soul, I knew who I was. And I always performed that by myself when I had the opportunity in the bathroom, when my mother wasn't home. I did what I could do to actualize how I felt about myself.
Do you think you were robbed of any childhood experiences because you couldn't, or were you just as expressive as you are now?
No,
And
I think that my story is my story. I wasn't born in the wrong body. This is me. I am trans, and I that's my experience. Yes, people have caused me pain and trauma through my experience, because I could have had this. Like today, we see young Black trans kids popping up, in like middle class communities. I wasn't fortunate to grow up in a middle class community or with parents who had a larger purview of the world. Like my mom doesn't have much education. She didn't have much support. So she was only doing what she was told to do. And, I don't really fault her for that. I fault the system, but I wasn't robbed. I've persevered. I've been resilient in my story. And I think that that is the reason why I'm here today. So I would not change any of my story for anything.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate that honesty. I want to bring Queen back to the conversation and just ask you a little bit about your childhood. Did you ever at any point feel like you had to grow up sooner than? And I guess I'll preface that with an example. So a lot of times, people feel like maybe a single parent or maybe both parents, middle child, that they are having to do things that a child shouldn't have to do, and they feel lonely or alone. Did you ever feel like you were on your own growing up? Did you have anyone that understood who you were?
Yes, I would definitely say I grew up in a Haitian home, in Haiti, and so for me, I grew up with two grandmothers who kind of really embraced me. So I would definitely say that, but I also was very aware that there are things that I wanted to do, dresses that I wanted to wear, the heels and the bras, the things that I wanted to indulge in that I knew I was not going to be allowed to do. Even playing with dolls, playing with my sister's toys. Those were things that I knew I would get in trouble for. So I think very early on, yes, I knew that this was going to mean I would get in trouble. This would mean that I would get scolded, that I would be reprimanded, right, for engaging in that kind of play.
And I think that's key, because if you were feeling that like you had the desire to play with these things as a child, it's something that you wanted to do as a child, but you paralleled trouble, or that you would get in trouble by doing those things that felt natural. Did that in any way link you feeling like the way that you felt, or that just you yourself were trouble?
No, absolutely not. No. I mean, I've personally, I know that I've been divine very early on, but I think for me, it's about survival, right? So if we know that in order to get from here, to get to school, to make sure that I'm not harassed at school, I think that some of us will then kind of adapt certain layers and we'll put on certain facades in order to pass, right? Code switching, all of that. So yes, so you will adopt something, your shield, your armor, so that way you can still be yourself, but that I don't have to explain myself to anyone, right? That yes, I am rocking a little Lisa Frank folder because I like it. And don't ask me about it. Don't even question me. Oh, well, why do you have a pink folder? Because I actually like Lisa Frank and glitter. And so for me, that has always just been Queen.
I hear it.
Yeah, and what I would want to say, I just wanted to touch on, because you mentioned earlier about things being unlearned. And I think for me, and I can only speak about Black culture because I'm a Black trans woman, is that there is always a reluctancy to learn, to embrace, and to even love folks who may be different from you, folks who walk in different shoes from you. But the reality is that, hey, we're all Black. We're all unified because we're all out here just trying to survive. But I think that when we say, that folks are ignorant or folks don't know, folks know, right? When you treat someone like shit, you know. When you put
what? I'm going to take that moment to say,
yeah, but I just want to indict it. I just want to indict the system here, because I think that it's not a reluctancy to not learn. I feel like we have been really brainwashed and tortured, and like our history here is very documented, and in a lot of instances, not even told to the extremes that we have experienced in this country, on this continent here. And I think that, like, you know, it's not that we don't want to learn, it's that we've been taught not to learn. And like Andy has said, excuse me, Queen has said, I'm sorry, I know her personally, so that's
and see, this happens sometimes where this has happened to me before, where my guest on the show there, and you know, here I am.
As Queen has said, as Queen has said, you know, we are trying to survive as a Black people, like, and we're doing all we can do. We're not doing enough. And I want to say that the compassion is not there. That needs to be there. The inclusivity is not there. But I want to indict the system and white supremacy, because that is the reason why Black people are in the predicament we are in. And we as a people need to reject that institution.
Well, I'm just gonna say, outside of this series, I'm gonna invite you back to talk more about white supremacy, because that's my lane, and dismantling it in every way and lifting our culture, and I'm all about that. So I will bring you back to that, because true to that statement, white supremacy is rooted so deeply that Black people perpetuate it in ways unknowingly, and we don't understand so many times that we've been taught these things from white supremacists. We've internalized them and made them traditions, and they have to be stomped out. They have to be stomped out. I want to ask,
even people that like are like Pan-African in this movement, that are like so Black power, like so you know, for Black people. You can see these pages on Facebook. They'll have like the African symbol, but then they'll like talk so down about trans people. And I
really want to get into that, because I think first I want to ask a blatant question. Both of you can answer. What do you think what is the I guess the most common misconception that you hear about Black trans women? What would you say, Gia, is the most common misconception about Black women that people have? Well, and let's talk about our people, that Black people have.
Yeah, like, you know, like that I'm like a sexual object, you know, like, and that, like, you know, like I'm a performance, and that I am a form of comedic relief. I am none of those things. I am a very serious, very, you know, intellectual, very, you know, loving individual. I'm like, you know, and I think that a lot of times when we have like these stereotypes of what a Black trans woman is, because a lot of times the white media has perpetuated a lot of these narratives and injected them into our communities, we are afraid to even approach trans people, because only thing you see us as on television is streetwalkers, and some of us are streetwalkers. I've streetwalked before, but that is not the totality of my experience as I sit before you today. So I think that, like, you know, we need to give the same consideration and courtesy to tell a full narrative and a full experience based off of our lived experiences that we give others.
Agree. Queen, most common misconception about Black trans women from your eyes?
Absolutely. I think for me, I can definitely say that in terms of misconception, my sister Deja says that your fantasies are not my fantasies. And ultimately that, you know, we are seen as deceptive, as manipulators, right? That we deceive the men that crave and desire our bodies. But the reality is like, you know, if you've met me at a certain corner, or if you've met me at a certain hour, you are only trying to receive a sacrament, right? But I think the reality is that we need to actually begin to dismantle this idea that somehow that trans women, that is a that's like the tool that they use. Did they provoke? Oftentimes when Black trans women are subjected to violence, it's in the handle that, well, what do they do? Were they not honest? Were they lying? Which ultimately, that still doesn't mean that they deserve to receive that treatment, that they deserve, that is justified. So that to me is a real big misconception, that somehow because of our actions that that it justifies that we should be hurt, that we should be killed, that we should be excluded from Black excellence. And so for me, I actually wanted to say that in regards to how we take up space, how we show up in the world, that it is imperative that we embrace each other. I literally just came back from the Commitment March in Washington, D.C., and we sat there for 4 hours, and not one of the speakers mentioned Black trans lives, right? They mentioned a lot of names that we have galvanized for. Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Sandra Bland, but somehow all the other names kind of got grouped into, well, and more names that we can't even mention. Well, why can't we mention them?
So I have the same question. Why do you think it's not mentioned?
Oh, why? Oh, absolutely. Because of fear. Because if a Black political man says Black trans lives matter, his sexuality will come into question, right? If a rapper, if T.I. or if Meek Mill said, hey, I'm down with Black trans women, they are going to be brought under inspection, right? That somehow now you're gay, now you're a faggot nigga, now you're with a nigga bitch. Right? So that is the issue, is because it's about fear. It's about that we can't really embrace someone because we are now going to come into question, which is problematic.
And in addition to that, we already said, that's why I don't participate in these movements, because if we're gonna have a Black movement, it needs to be Black. And this idea that we want to have this perfect Black man that is at the forefront of these conversations, like the ones that Queen just said, and they can't be hold each other accountable and be held accountable themselves for not only their privilege, but the violence that they have perpetuated against us, and utilize their allyship, if they want to be called that, to for the greater good. I can't participate because it's just I'm Black too, and
I want to land there for a second and talk about that, because we have done a number of series on Black lives, obviously, on this show, and I have my former producer, one of my closest friends, has echoed the same sentiments to me, not participating because it's not inclusive for all. And her check really checked me, and this was maybe 4 or 5 months ago, because she said it, and she was very serious, very, very direct, and I know her well. I mean, she's produced for me, so she's like, this movement is not inclusive, and nobody talks about it, nobody addresses it, nobody in plain sight. When Black women are ignored, Black trans women are ignored. These lives are typically and regularly ignored. And at the same time, we're expected to be out here and being champions for some of the same people that attack and brutalize us.
Yes.
And I'm not with it. And so I think I appreciate you for saying it, and I want you to say it louder. That her checking me like that has brought it to the forefront for me. So I'm out here advocating, and I really don't give a damn what anybody thinks.
Because the thing is that we have a public health crisis in our Black community, and it's very specific. Black cisgender men are killing Black trans women, and it's a very specific thing that is rooted in the experiences that we have as Black trans women. Other trans women do not have a life expectancy of 35. You do not see other races of trans women being brutalized in the way you see Black trans women being brutalized, to the extent and to the frequency of the brutalization. So it is a very specific thing that is happening. And because we have been living through, and our movements have been existing through the gaze of whiteness, we are not able to check that. And even if police brutality stops, Black cis men will still be killing Black trans women, and that is at the forefront of my safety and of my security. So in order for me to walk down the streets and yell and yell and yell, we need to have these conversations, or I can't do it. I need to just stay in my house, be safe, live my life, and just worry about how I'm going to survive and my girls are going to survive.
Yeah, I will definitely say to echo what my sister G is saying. I think for me that is like what actually propels me to fight, right? So for me, in Black Trans Liberation, we are out almost every day in the streets to make sure we can create space and create access for Black trans women, especially in these conversations, as we're describing how we want for us to reset when we were kind of return from the COVID crisis. I mean, these are things that folks aren't discussing. I will definitely say that I think for me personally, I just want to ensure that Black trans women, that they are centered in how we describe about visibility, representation. When we're talking about giving Black people access, we need to give Black trans women and men and our siblings access, that they too need job security, that they too need to have proper healthcare, affordable education. These are things that young trans folks don't even have an understanding of, because those are things that aren't even an option for them. So I think for me, through Black Trans Liberation, we want to open up those doors and have folks able to receive the same care and the same attention that we are giving moving forward. And then the last thing I will also comment on is the fact that when I did go to DC this past weekend, the reality was that there were a lot of vendors, and I actually shared this, vendors who came from all over the country to sell merchandise. They were, to me, because we went around actively seeking Black Trans Lives Matter representation. They didn't have it. And ultimately, by the end of the day, there was a man who was saying, hey, we got shirts, all sizes. And I said, brother, but you don't have all the messages. You purposely did not invest in Black Trans Lives Matter because you knew that somehow it wouldn't sell. You knew that no one would want to buy it, that no one would want to subscribe or support. So that to me is what, when we talk about the supremacy, when we talk about the unlearning, that is how we begin to unlearn, that somehow that we don't have a value, that somehow Black trans liberation is not something that is in your forefront, that it needs to be. Even down to the granular level, we need to be centered. We need to be discussed. Our name should be mentioned because oftentimes, like my sister G already said, with or without police brutality, we will always be at the receiving end of violence, because somehow white fragility, white supremacy has now leaked into our bloodstream, that now we are also subjected to that. Thank you.
I have a few questions. I think that insight is valuable, and I think that like these conversations, bringing this conversation to the forefront is really important. And I think that we need to, Black trans lives do matter. Black trans lives should be visible. Black trans lives should be discussed. And so I think in addition to the fear, and the subset of people knowing, I think there's a larger set of people that know. I think there's also a large set of people that don't understand. When it comes, so I have a few questions, because I think when it comes to education, people, where is the first place that people should turn? I think that it can be taxing on a person to be asked about their humanity over and over and over again. You are a human first. So, I mean, we are all humans. So no one wants to be asked, like, I'm a human, you're a human. I'm not asking you, like, about what it takes, all of the steps. But when it comes to education, and for people that want to be educated properly, and they want to have the language, and they want to be allies, where should they begin?
Well, so, I'm just gonna just use this as an example. Like, as a Black trans woman, I'm an American citizen. I was born here. I don't know, like, the experiences like that people who are undocumented or who immigrate here. Like, I don't know what that experience is like firsthand, but I have met people who, you know, live that experience. And it's not an easy experience. It's definitely a horrifying and one of the experiences that I think needs to be talked about and often represented more in our conversations, because oftentimes Black people are out at the forefront of that conversation as well. And you know what I do to learn about that is, you know, I literally, like you said, treat people as human beings, and develop friendships, develop, you know, partnerships with these people. And through having a relationship with them, I learn the person and I know what extent in which I can have conversations with them. Most people in this world don't even want to have a conversation with a trans person. They have so much bigotry and hatred and transphobia in their hearts and in their minds that they don't even want to sit down at a table and have a coffee, right? And just talk about life, not just about, and that's the problem that I have. Like, I'm not a conversation piece to give you a history on gender and sexuality. No, I am, as I said, a very nuanced person. So we can have a very in-depth conversation about tennis, and then maybe I can then share with you about my experience as a Black trans tennis fan and what that means to me when I show up at the tennis court as a Black trans woman, right? So the thing is that we need to, in fact, treat everyone as a human being and start approaching people on a human level and invite people into your hearts and into your minds, right? Simply.
Well, I think that's the root of a lot of issues that we have right now. I think just is everybody, every issue is polarizing. Everybody is on their own sides. People don't like talking to people that don't agree with them. People don't like talking to people that don't believe like them. And I know how we got here.
Trans people are used to doing that. I'm used to doing that. You know, we're like the, I don't want to sound like Donald Trump here and be like, we're the most this, that, and third. I feel like, you know, because of my experience, I've always had to make space for other people, because like I've always been at the margins of every conversation. Like I've never had certain things. Like, there was a first for everything. The first time I read a book about trans people, I was an adult. Right. So basically, like, what I mean is that, like, you know, give people the same consideration you expect yourself. And that's where the dismantling of white supremacy comes in for Black folks. Because I think that a lot of times the reason why I can't get jiggy with a lot of this stuff is because I'm like, okay, so the way you want these people to treat you, you don't think you should treat me that way. The way you don't want them to stereotype you and clutch their purse, you don't think you should think that I want to sexually assault you because I'm existing.
Or we can't use their bathroom.
Right. So these are the same considerations that so treat people how you want to be treated. And that's how we will move forward.
I agree with that. I actually had to check, and I always checking, but I checked this girl that posted, we had an affiliation years ago, and she was emoting on social media about the Black Lives Matter website lifting the voices of the unheard, really, trans Black women that are, and it literally just, they have an excerpt on their website talking about it, and she brings it to the forefront. I don't understand why this needs to be called out this way, which I literally said to her, you literally understand it because it caught your eye, because it's something that you're not paying attention to. So the reason you're triggered by it is because you feel like it shouldn't be there. And her exact question was, why doesn't Black Lives Matter cover all Black lives? And it's like, because Black trans people are telling you that it doesn't. It's just like when Black people tell white people that all lives matter does not cover us. So in the same way that Black trans people are telling us this, we need to listen. And so I do think that enlightenment and learning and just a conversation over coffee goes a long way, because these conversations that people need to have, I'm hoping that this conversation is starting to change some people's minds and their hearts.
You must treat to coffee, because the thing is it's called equity. And a lot of Black trans women have been denied opportunities just because we are trans. Our existence has been curbed just because we are trans. So if you want to learn and you want to develop a friendship with trans people, invest in us, right? And treat us to coffee. You know what I mean? And then you and think about that in the larger scheme of things. Give up some of your privilege to be to level the playing field, because society and this white system is not going to do that for us.
What do you say to? Go ahead, Queen.
Yes, thank you. What I would definitely say is that I find that Black trans folks consistently have to prove our existence, that we somehow have to prove and define why it is that we matter, that we have to explain. To be quite frank, if my life expectancy is 35, I don't really have too much time to be explaining, right? I think you also have to do a certain level of research and a certain level of understanding. Do your own reconnaissance, right? Understand how you can show up for trans people. It shouldn't be upon trans people. This isn't a trans issue. This is our issue, right? We can't just, again, put it on the onus that somehow that you're going to be absolved, right? If you know one trans person. You are not absolved. You will not be absolved, right? Our hands are all complicit. We're all complicit because, as we know, even right now, there have been now two Black unidentified bodies, potential of trans experience, who have been found, but they have been misgendered, misnamed, dead named. And so for me, it's just like, how can we say that we are here for liberation when we are literally erasing and leaving out our own siblings? So that to me is the issue. That to me is how I think that's where the conversation is. But it shouldn't be upon a trans woman, a Black trans woman, to tell you or to guide you. I think you as a human being should have that decency to show up regardless. You shouldn't have to wait till someone is killed for you to now feel something. You should have been felt something. You as a human should feel something because we're also human, right? So that when you think about how you want to advocate, the same way that you are glorified in saying Breonna Taylor, you should be glorified to say Brayla Stone, Bree Black, Dominique Remy Fells, Raya Milton, Laylene Polanco Extravaganza. These are women that have literally been taken away from us that we aren't mentioning. Drea McCarty. I mean, it's so puzzling, again, that we have to prove why we matter. That we have to prove to someone that our life is just as valuable as yours. But somehow, because I'm a Black trans woman, you don't feel that same way. You don't feel the same earnestness to defend and support me. You won't protect me. If I were on the street like we saw in LA, 3 trans women of color being attacked, trans women being attacked by a group of men, and Black folks walking by and opening up their phones to go live. But they will not protect us. So that to me is how you can show up. Protect us.
I have a question. And this is, I actually have 2 questions. Probably more than that. This question is takes me back because I think that I have a lot of conversations. I've been talking my whole life. So when I talk to older people or seasoned people, I won't give them old, but I say people get to a certain age, and this is I'm scaling back a little bit and talking to. Not necessarily Generation X, but the baby boomers that are somewhere between 1945 and 1965. And their education is their education. They've learned what they've learned. And they're not a community collectively that is interested in relearning. And so everything, not just trans women or trans men, but the fact that you don't identify with your gender blindsides them because they're like, I learned it this way. This is all there was. These new people are making things up. So my question is, because that's literally what you hear. Like I listen to, it could be somebody's grandmother, it could be somebody's mom, because they are, and I'm gonna preface what I'm saying with this. I think worldview has a lot to do with why we are in such a limited state of understanding and acceptance, not just in America, well, in America specifically, but I think exposure is also a life changer, right? I think if you have grown up in a certain area and all you have had is access, like your access to the world has been the internet, you may have some limited viewpoints, and there's a wealth of information out there. But if you've only traveled within 20 miles of where you live, sometimes you only know what exists in those 20 miles. And there are people that live in this country that in 20 miles, the only people that live within those 20 miles is their family, and they've never gone. And I'm talking, and I'm not shading it in any way, but I'm saying you live in Nebraska and your next neighbor is a mile away. All the neighbors are your family. Your overall exposure, like where you go to school, where you go to work, everything is limited. And so the exposure, what do you say to people that truly don't know how to ask and aren't prompted or don't feel obligated to research because they already know?
What I will definitely say, I recently actually got asked to speak at a church in Harlem about reckoning with how we use pronouns at the service, right? When we say pronouns, when we greet people when they come to worship. And I was saying that, wow, this is really great. This is overdue. I mean, I come from a church family, so it's something that, like, well, again, that we make assumptions, but it is about literally as simple as asking someone, "Hi, my love, what are your pronouns?" That again is something that is will seem far out, right? Because when we agree, especially in the context of church, right? Hey, sister, good morning, sister. Good morning, brother. Good morning, beloved. So these are things that I feel like we are going to ultimately have to reckon with. That yes, even though your existence, even to seeing a trans woman, may be at the Walmart. But that even at the Walmart, there's an opportunity for you to make connection. There's an opportunity for you to build. It's not a burden. It's an opportunity for you to ask and to engage with someone, and not to necessarily snicker, because I think a lot of folks will do that as well. Because we don't know, we'll assume, we'll fill in the blanks. Don't fill in the blanks, because I can fill them in for you. So I think that is something that I think is really imperative when we talk about our elders, our esteemed parents, folks who, again, might feel rooted and cemented in the way that they do things. But my dear, the tide is turning. We will have to change. We will have to adapt, because that is what we're asking for. We're asking for white people to love and accept us, to give us space. We also need to give each other space. That when we show up for each other, that we can allow someone, a trans woman, to take up space. And that, yes, she will not be clocked. Yes, and whether or not she is cis-assuming or not, that should not mean that that is the extension of your tolerance. Fuck your tolerance.
Yeah, so basically when it comes to like the elders, I think that that's like just a general societal problem. Like we forget about the elders, we give up on them. So I feel like they sometimes don't engage society, you know what I mean? Because that's the narrative. When I become an elder, I chill, I just, you know what I mean? Like the narrative of becoming an elder and what that means. A lot of people don't even check on their grandparents, you know what I mean? Like, because they're not moving as fast as they are moving. So I think that, that's just an issue that we have as a society, like where we don't like really engage elders. But I think that, it's about like mental capacity as well and the ability. And I think that's another thing that plays into it, because some people, because they're forgotten about and they're just like left out there to be an elder, they don't have the mental capacity to like take in these like new things. But then you have some elders like Angela Davis, who talks about how we need to have more space in defining what a woman is and be more inclusive of trans women and being a cis ally in these like critical and academic spaces. So I think that it's like, in terms of accountability, we just need to hold elders accountable and like to let them know that they too can participate in this changing and in the equity of the world. We're not giving up on them. And I just want to say this. With elders, I realized that and with a lot of people, like they would say they don't know trans people, but then when you like talk to them about their history, they would be like, oh, well, I didn't know this person was trans. But there was a person who I went to school with And I feel that trans people have been existing just as long as everyone else, right?
Yeah.
We're not new. So the thing is that maybe like the language has changed. Maybe we have become more affirmed in how we speak about ourselves and demanding respect, and we're not allowing people to disrespect us. But like, Crystal LaBeija and that video, that documentary about the Queen, that was from the 60s.
Yeah.
The Girls from Paris is Burning, that was like the 70s. They were pumping in Harlem. People had trans neighbors. So it's like, it's about, growing with the times and really investing in our elders and like really keeping them active so that they too can participate in the transformation of consciousness in this world.
Yeah, and I will also piggyback and echo what my sister's saying, in that I think oftentimes our elders will say, or even like our parents, their generation, that, oh, well, we don't have a problem with gays. It's just that we just don't agree with the lifestyle. And I think this again is like what, to me, when we talk about a colonial mindset, is that yes, you do have a problem. You actually don't really support someone who's different from you, because again, they are othered. So because it's unknown, you've now rejected it. And that is, I think, a lot of what trans folks, trans youth ultimately face, is that they are rejected from society. They're rejected from community, rejected from their homes, rejected from a church even, right? So it's like, well, how can you say, well, we don't have a problem. It's just that we don't accept that lifestyle, right? Within our home, these are just things that we just can't tolerate. That things that we don't align with. Why can't you align with it? Is this not your child? Is this not your cousin? Is this not someone who deserves to be loved? And so because of that, I really think that, yes, our generation, again, there is a level of accountability that needs to be married with advocacy. That, like, you have to show up even when we're not in the room. If Gia and I aren't in the room, you should still say Black Trans Lives Matter, right? As you, as someone with access and someone who's a leader, right? Even within your own establishment at work, right? That, are you doing things in your own setting, in your own profession, right? Are there trans women or trans folks even on your staff? Right, that these are things that I think we need to really begin to address moving forward. And again, it's not about just having one person there. No, this is not something that you can just subscribe to and then your responsibility is over. Absolutely not. It is imperative that we continually and consistently show up. And that means representation. That means if you know that, hey, I'm looking around and we don't have that trans voice, or we don't have someone to give us that perspective, that flavor, that joie de vivre that we'll innately bring to the table, then you should have that.
I think honestly, this conversation always will move the culture forward. I think the freedom. I love the freedom that both you, Queen, and Gia both bring to this conversation. I think you don't get to that place until you walk in your truth. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that they deny their truth by denying other people, because I don't think acknowledging, embracing something that's not you does not make you that. But it does make you a denier of the truth. It makes you a denier of your own truth and denier of your own surroundings. I think if you could share words of advice or encouragement for, or guidance for parents that have identified that their children, maybe their children are trans. And the parents haven't not known how to acknowledge it. We spoke about earlier that kids are coming into their truth earlier and earlier and earlier, and there's not training. These conversations, we know they're not happening in the Black community. There were not parenting conversations happening, enough parenting conversations happening in the Black community in general. So we know they're not happening surrounding this topic. What words of guidance would you give to a parent with a trans child?
Well, I'll just say, like, I can't speak from a perspective of a parent, well, like a person who like raises a child, but I would say what I would want, right? I would want more empathy and consideration, and understanding that, like, I may not grow up, like, we should not, like, we need to, like, kind of like dismantle this idea that our children should grow up in our likeness and in our image, because that may not be the case. And like really like accepting your children for who they are. Imagine like denying your child something or supporting them through like whatever they choose to do, right? Supporting them through the beliefs that are like not aligned with what you have been taught, right? And really, doing the research and doing the necessary work to make sure that your child is loved and supported. Because the thing is that the world is very cruel, and it is really, really traumatizing to be abused every day and not have no place to go to feel safe, not even in your own home. And that is the case for a lot of trans people. And safety is not, I'm not talking about safety from just physical violence, but it's like, emotional violence, spiritual violence. These are all forms of violence that really torment and are frequent in among black trans women. And I think that, we need to just be more kind really to our children, right? And also understand that when your children become adults, you may have some work you need to do to remedy and atone for the trauma you have caused us. And remember that at the end of the day, and I'm going to use I statements here, like I will always be my mother's child, no matter how old I am. And, we need to move forward together, and we need to do the work, and the work is not easy. It's hard. It's a lot of honesty. It takes open-mindedness and willingness to change. And that's what I feel parents should take when dealing with all types of children.
Absolutely.
All types of children.
I mean, I think for me, I will say being a trans child growing up, I think it was something that I wished my parents could have just allowed me to be me. As simple as that is. I wish that I was allowed to play with that doll. I wish I was allowed to maybe wear that little bootcut jean or whatever it is, but that somehow, because I wanted to do that thing, because I didn't want to play with a particular toy, because I didn't want to wear certain things, that somehow meant that I was wrong. That somehow that we are telling people that they're wrong, that they're unloved, that they're not beautiful. And for me, that is something that I swallowed and agonized with a lot of my childhood. But it definitely took my community of friends and family outside of the home who loved me, who said, "You're beautiful, you're popping, like you are magic." And that is something that I think that we instill in our kids. I mean, Queen Whitney Houston, right? Children are the future. But if you're telling a child that they need to act like a boy, that they need to stop switching and stop carrying on like this, how can they actually ever receive love? How can they feel powerful? How can they feel confident? And that is something that I wish parents could just be loving. I mean, personally, when I look at parents like Dwayne Wade, it's to see a father show up for their child, regardless of what's happening. I think a lot of times we get so consumed about genitalia. Lil Boosie, calm down, right? First off, that you should be focusing on your own kids, but that's another subject. But I just really feel that we have got to be better humans, right? We need to instill that our kids can sustain, that they can survive, right? Because we already know that they will be subjected just because of the color of their skin, elbow black, right? I'm going to face a lot of discrimination. I will face hardships. But if I can't even be the full, powerful, unique myself, if I can't be myself at home, around the kitchen table, with my little nails, whatever the case may be, if I can't be that there, then where else can I be? Where else can I learn that I have power? If we don't have power within our own home, That to me is how we begin to start. We need to instill that as a Black person, your power is there because we are divinely made and created in His likeness. So we don't have to equivocate. We don't need to question. We don't need to be turmoiled. We don't have to unfurl all the time because someone is gay, because someone is queer, because someone is trans. Allow them to be that. Love them for that. And not in spite of, but because of. Thank you.
Beautifully said. I honestly think I could go another hour and have this conversation and keep, because I think there's so much power in truth, and I think that I've gotten so much from this conversation. I have to bring it to a close. If there's so much work to be done. If people want to start doing some of this work or want to get involved and they don't really know where to start, where should they go? Where should they begin? Aside from education, and I want to direct people to some places that they can educate themselves. And I don't know if just a regular Google search is enough. Are there certain organizations or awareness campaigns that people can look into?
So I think that generally, like usually most places have like a LGBTQ center. Well, we're privileged in New York, but in a lot of cities.
Yeah, New York's on another level.
Yeah. We have a lot of them, but like some places have one. I think like, for those people who live in those places, like the 20-mile places, the closest LGBTQ center to you, and a lot of them in the day and age that we are in provide online resources, virtual resources, virtual support groups. There are a lot of social media, outlets like I'm a brand, you know what I mean? Like not just a brand, but like my activism, like my social media presence is activism. So like follow the girls, follow us, like look at our content. Not just ask questions, because I feel like I said, if you sit with me for a while, you'll learn, because I'm going to tell you. So my Instagram is love.gia. You can follow me there. And you'll learn something. You will. Like, I post pictures of me partying. I post education. I allow my social media to tell my story. A book that people can read that I think is very, 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 very educational, but also it's a personal, like it could get personal for a lot of people, is Redefining Realness by Janet Mock.
Yeah.
Like that's a great book to like just learn, but also get a good story out of it as well. And like you said, like, search the internet, go on Twitter, like, but the thing about the internet is that you have to be careful because, there's different segments of a narrative out there, and it is up to you to determine what is the best narrative that, it aligns with the story you want to tell and what you want your personal narrative to be. So definitely do the work. It's not easy.
Absolutely. Queen.
Hey. So I would definitely say that, for me, it's imperative that we create moments where we can have a conversation. And I think that we should not feel that, oh, I can't have a conversation because I don't know. I think conversations can literally start in your own household. At the kitchen table, we can start to unpack and begin to really examine and discover ways that we can be better to each other. And again, it's not about having all the tools all the time, right? But we can start, and then we can continue to build. We can continue to grow. I will say that for me, I'm definitely heavy on the social media. On Instagram, I'm at Queen Jean, QWEEN _JEAN. And you can also go to my website, blacktransliberation.com. It is a resource for liberation, for a lot of actions that are happening in New York City, and a lot of other community co-conspirators, as we call them, who are also creating spaces and access in regards to resources. So that is something that you can also check into. I think for me, something that I want to share, one of my brothers is a barber, and I sent him a message. I was like, look, can you please tell the fellas in the barbershop, don't antagonize the strong Black brothers who show up for Black trans liberation. Take the chains off and join us, because you should save that negativity for therapy. We don't need to alienate because someone else is trying to figure out how they can show up. So I think that is something that we should be cognizant of, is that because someone is trying to navigate how they can show up, how they can take a step out on faith, how they can step out and begin to love and begin to embrace, they should not be met with resistance, especially by another Black man.
Absolutely. Listen, we will make sure that your contact information and how people reach out to you is available, not just on our social media, but I'll put it out there as well, because I want people to connect. I actually want both of you to come back, so please come back and join me for further dialogue, not just about this topic, but in general, because I think you offer so much perspective to Blackness and so much truth to Blackness. And I think that all of us have to be cognizant that we have to do the work so that everybody feels included. And that's what I want people to get out of this. I can't be more appreciative that you guys agreed to do this series, because the conversation goes everywhere. Like I told you an hour ago, we didn't know where we were going to land, and here we are. I think there's just so much insight, that valuable insight that people can't get from just searching online and hearing the truth from both you, Gia, and Queen. I think that's life changing. So, ladies, thank you for joining me today, and thank you for tuning into this series. It continues. Black Trans Woman Hear Me, and this series continues. So check us out, Unmuted Nation, on Twitter, Instagram, and .com. We've got more Unmuted Nation after this. Stay with us.